Faith calls things that are not as though they were. This is a principle that few Christians realize, is that we got to speak what God has promised before we can see it. This is what Abraham had to do. This principle is found here in Romans chapter 4, verse 17, where it says this, as it is written, I have made you a father of many nations. Now, this is God speaking. He says, I have. He didn't say, I will make you. He says, I have made you a father of many nations. And then Paul explains, he is our father in the sight of God, in whom he believed, the God who gives life to the dead and calls into being things that were not. You see, what it's showing is that God is telling him, you're going to have to change your name, and you're going to have to join with me, Abraham, in calling yourself the father of many nations. Up to this time, his name was Abram, father of many. But now God says, it's time for you to change what you've been saying about yourself. It's time to let everyone know that you are the father of many nations. And yet, he didn't have any children through Sarah. Can you imagine him telling all of his servants, listen, God has spoken to me, and from now on, I shall be called Abraham, the father of many nations. And they must have all looked and said, but sir, you don't even have one child. How can you say this? But see, that's what faith does. Faith calls into being the things that do not yet exist. See, that's why you have to call 1 Peter 2:24 into being. By his wounds, I have been healed. So if you've had mental problems, physical problems, emotional problems, you need to start saying, I am healed. See, that's what you're doing. You're calling things that are not as though they were. This is the principle of faith. If you don't do this, you're not going to see the promises of God. You have to call into Philippians 4:19. My God shall supply all my needs. But you say to me, but all of my needs are not supplied yet. But that's what faith does. Faith says it before it sees it. It calls into being the things that do not yet exist. Now, somebody might say, isn't that lying? No. Lying is to say something false in order to deceive someone. We're not here to deceive anyone. We're here to face the facts that maybe we are sick, or maybe the money isn't sufficient yet, but we're declaring it by faith. That's not lying. That is a declaration of faith. Abraham had to start doing this. He had to imitate God. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 5, be ye imitators of God. So what we're talking about is following after God's pattern, saying what we believe God has made us to be. And he has made you a child of God, a joint heir with Jesus Christ. He's made you healed. He's made you blessed. He's made you the righteousness of God. He's made you a new creation. And you have to declare it, even if in the natural you don't see it. But it is through declaring it that you will start to have it. It is through confessing it that you will possess it. And if you don't follow this principle, then your faith is going to be limited to what it can have with God. Start calling things that are not as though they were.